The storm raged across the coastline as Jonathan Ward, the seeker of truth, stared at the old manuscript spread across his desk. He whispered, "Every story has a kernel of truth." The parchment bore faded ink, symbols only a few could interpret, and Jonathan believed they pointed to the hidden fortune of the Knights Templar. His heart raced, though his face stayed calm, his eyes unblinking. Outside, thunder crashed like ancient drums, as though the past itself demanded his attention. He leaned closer, tracing the lines with trembling fingers, and muttered, "This secret has waited long enough." Lightning flashed, illuminating the room with blinding light, casting his shadow across the walls like a looming specter. Somewhere in the darkness the faint echo of footsteps could be imagined, though he dismissed it as a trick of his tired mind. Morning light seeped into the study, softer now than the storm before. Jonathan closed his eyes briefly, exhausted yet resolute. He thought of his late father, who once told him the Templars left more than myths behind. The memory burned as fuel for his obsession. He rose from his chair, pacing the room with the manuscript in hand, whispering, "Every lead must be pursued." The study smelled of damp parchment and smoke. He pulled open a drawer, revealing a compass and an ancient coin, relics of journeys past. His lips curled into a faint smile, determination carving itself into his tired face. He knew the path ahead promised danger, yet he felt alive in the pursuit. Outside the storm had calmed, but its echo lingered in the air like a warning. The door creaked open as Margaret Ellis, the reluctant ally, stepped inside with cautious eyes. Her calm demeanor contrasted Jonathan's intensity. "You haven't slept," she remarked, brushing raindrops from her coat. Jonathan answered sharply, "Sleep is irrelevant when truth waits." Margaret shook her head, scanning the cluttered room filled with relics and fading maps. She crossed her arms, warning, "Obsession is dangerous, Jonathan." He ignored her tone, holding up the coin as proof of his pursuit. Her gaze softened, but her voice carried doubt. Some truths are buried for good reason. Silence thickened, broken only by the ticking of a clock. Jonathan spread maps across the desk, their surfaces covered in cryptic markings. Margaret leaned closer, unwilling yet drawn to the puzzle. He explained every symbol traces a path to their treasure. She sighed, muttering, "And every path leads to madness." Jonathan's voice tightened. "This isn't about gold. It's about truth." Their eyes locked, his brimming with fire, hers with doubt. She placed a cautious hand on the parchment, whispering, "Then truth better be worth your soul." The air grew heavier, as if unseen eyes lingered beyond the room. The study door rattled as wind burst through a cracked window. Margaret startled, but Jonathan stayed fixed on the parchment. From the corner of the room, a faint figure of dust and shadow seemed to flicker before vanishing. Margaret whispered, "Did you see that?" Jonathan replied coldly, "Imagination thrives in places like this." Yet unease traced his tone. He closed the manuscript carefully, placing it inside a leather satchel. "If answers lie ahead," he said, "we follow them." Margaret hesitated, torn between reason and the pull of mystery. The house groaned under the wind's weight, as though alive with secrets. The city library's basement smelled of dust and forgotten years. Jonathan Ward descended the stone steps with Margaret Ellis at his side, her voice low. "Are you sure about this?" He replied firmly, "Knowledge hides in shadows." Shelves groaned under the weight of manuscripts, many untouched for centuries. A lantern swung above, creaking faintly. Margaret brushed her hand over a book's spine, whispering, "These secrets were buried for a reason." Jonathan pulled a rolled parchment from a hidden shelf, heart pounding. "The Templars left clues," he said, "and this is one of them." Margaret's eyes narrowed, torn between caution and curiosity. Outside, the muted thunder of distant rain pressed against the silence inside the archive. Jonathan unrolled the parchment on a wooden table, revealing coded markings resembling constellations. Margaret leaned in, whispering, "It looks like nonsense." Jonathan's eyes glinted in the lantern light as he explained, "It's a map disguised as stars." He traced a line across the symbols with trembling fingers. Margaret frowned, muttering, "A treasure hunt based on riddles." He smirked. "The truth demands riddles." The lantern flickered, shadows crawling across the stone walls. For a moment, the room felt alive, as if unseen watchers stirred in the darkness. Jonathan's pulse quickened, though his voice stayed calm. "We follow the stars, and they will lead us to the Knights." From the shadows emerged Professor Alistair Green, the keeper of secrets, his calm voice echoing. "You won't find answers here." Jonathan stiffened, turning to face the older man. Green, 62, his silver hair combed back, wore a scholar's suit, his eyes sharp as steel. Margaret whispered, "Who is he?" Jonathan answered bitterly, "A man who fears the truth." Green stepped closer, voice smooth and deliberate. "The Templar treasure is not yours to uncover. Walk away before the cost becomes unbearable." Jonathan clenched his jaw but remained silent, his gaze locked with Green's. The tension cut through the cold air like a blade, ancient secrets pressing in around them. Jonathan slammed a fist against the table, his voice harsh. "The truth belongs to no one." Green's expression remained calm, though his tone cut like ice. "Truth destroys, Jonathan. It is a weapon too dangerous to wield." Margaret stepped between them, her voice steady enough. "Secrets or not, fighting each other solves nothing." Green's eyes flickered with something unspoken, perhaps fear, perhaps arrogance. Jonathan snatched the parchment, stuffing it into his satchel. "You can't bury this forever," he growled. Green replied, almost whispering, "Some graves should never be disturbed." The silence that followed seemed heavier than the stone walls themselves. Margaret's voice broke the silence, softer now. "If this path costs you everything, Jonathan, will it still be worth it?" He paused, eyes dark and determined, answering, "Yes, the truth is worth any price." Green's footsteps echoed as he retreated into the shadows, his last words drifting back, "Then prepare to pay." Jonathan adjusted his satchel, steadying his breath. Margaret's eyes lingered on him, torn between fear and loyalty. The lantern swayed gently above them, its light fading into corners that seemed too deep, too endless. Outside, the rain returned, whispering against the stone like secrets waiting to be told. Jonathan Ward hurried across the rain-slick cobblestone streets of Paris, his satchel heavy with the Templar map. Margaret Ellis followed, breath quickening, muttering, "We're being watched." Jonathan scanned the rooftops, eyes narrowing. Shadows clung to the alleys, but every step echoed too loudly. A figure darted behind them, unseen but present. Jonathan whispered, "Green isn't finished with us." Margaret's voice trembled with urgency. "Then we need to move faster." They turned into a narrow passageway, lantern light spilling weakly across ancient stone. The city seemed alive with whispers, as though the past stirred alongside them. The chase had begun, and there was no turning back. They stopped briefly under a crumbling archway, breaths visible in the cold night air. Margaret whispered, "We can't outrun him forever." Jonathan's jaw tightened as he unfolded the map, rain droplets staining the parchment. "We follow this path," he said. Margaret peered at the symbols, her voice sharp, "Through catacombs. That's madness." Jonathan looked at her, eyes fierce. "Madness is leaving without answers." Thunder rolled above, masking the sound of footsteps closing in. Margaret gripped his arm, fear and determination warring on her face. "Then let's move, before he catches us." The echo of pursuit drove them deeper into the labyrinthine streets. Descending into the Paris catacombs, Jonathan held a lantern high, the flickering light revealing endless walls of skulls. Margaret's voice was low, reverent. "This place feels cursed." Jonathan replied firmly, "Curses are for the fearful. Truth waits below." Their footsteps echoed like whispers from the dead. Margaret pressed closer, muttering, "You can't ignore what this place is." Jonathan touched the stone, tracing faint engravings etched into the wall. His pulse quickened. These symbols matched the map. Dotted. The air grew colder, as though unseen eyes followed. Shadows stretched unnaturally with the lantern flame. Every corner promised revelation or ruin. The sound of footsteps echoed behind them, sharper now. Margaret froze, whispering, "He's here." Jonathan turned quickly, lantern casting light on a figure emerging from shadows. It was the deceiver, Adrian Cross, 41, charming smile, hiding menace. "You'll need help," Adrian said smoothly. Jonathan scowled, voice low, "I don't trust you." Adrian spread his hands, mock sincerity in his tone. "But you need me." Margaret's face hardened, whispering, "We can't afford betrayal." Adrian stepped closer, eyes glinting. "Without me, you'll never see daylight again." The catacombs groaned under silence, the tension thick enough to choke. They pressed forward, Adrian leading the way with unsettling confidence. Jonathan whispered to Margaret, "He's hiding something." Margaret's voice was edged with doubt. "Then why follow him?" Jonathan's reply was firm, "Because he knows the path." Adrian's lantern cast distorted shadows, stretching like grasping hands across the walls. He said lightly, "The Templars loved their secrets. You're close, closer than Green wants you to be." Jonathan's heart thudded, but suspicion gnawed at him. Margaret's eyes flicked between them, mistrust clear. The silence of the catacombs pressed heavy, broken only by the drip of unseen water and the echo of uncertain footsteps. The catacombs opened into a cavern, the damp air clinging to their lungs. Adrian Cross strode ahead, lantern raised, his voice echoing, "This is where the map begins to make sense." Jonathan Ward followed, wary eyes fixed on him, every step grinding into the stone floor. Margaret Ellis trailed behind, her whisper tight with unease. "He's leading us deeper, but to what end?" Adrian turned, his face half lit by the glow, a smile that promised charm but hinted at danger. "You'll have to trust me," he said smoothly. Jonathan's reply was sharp, cutting through the cold. "Trust is earned, not borrowed." Silence pressed down like the weight of the earth above, broken only by the rhythmic drip of water. Margaret's gaze shifted uneasily between the two men, fear whispering in her heart that the path forward might lead them not to answers, but into ruin. Adrian stopped before a carved wall, its markings faded but unmistakable. His voice was low, reverent. "These symbols tell of the Templars' covenant." Jonathan leaned in, lantern casting golden light across the engravings, muttering, "Half of this is gone." Adrian's lips curled into a sly smile, "And I know where the rest lies." Margaret Ellis folded her arms, her expression guarded, suspicion etched into every line. "Why would you share this with us?" she asked sharply. Adrian's reply came smooth as silk, almost mocking. "Because without me, you are blind in the dark." Jonathan clenched his jaw, whispering to Margaret, "Every word is bait." The torches hissed faintly, and their shadows stretched across the carved wall like restless spirits, as if the dead themselves leaned in to listen. Jonathan stepped back from the wall, his voice low, steady with rising anger. "You're hiding something." Adrian's smile faltered, his eyes narrowing with irritation. "I've given you more than you deserve," he retorted. Margaret Ellis moved between them, her voice cutting sharp. "Enough. Secrets won't save us down here." Adrian's tone softened, dangerously calm. "Secrets are the only shield that keeps you alive." Jonathan tightened his grip on the lantern, its flame trembling as if echoing his fury. "One more lie, Adrian, and we leave you here," he said, his words laced with threat. The cavern fell still, echoes fading into a silence so thick it pressed on their ears. Margaret's gaze flicked from one to the other, fear etched into her features, but behind it glowed a grim resolve to see them through whatever the cost. The tunnel narrowed, walls pressing in like the jaws of a trap. Margaret whispered, "This place feels wrong, like it wants us gone." Adrian chuckled, though unease flashed in his eyes. "Stone doesn't care who walks its halls." Jonathan's voice was sharper, colder, but those who built it cared very much. They pressed onward, every step heavier, the air colder. Adrian walked ahead with practiced confidence, but his quick glances betrayed his nerves. Margaret leaned toward Jonathan, her whisper urgent, "He's steering us off the path." Jonathan's reply was tight, certain. I know. Still they followed, the drip of water echoing like a ticking clock. Shadows clung to the corners, and the silence seemed alive, breathing with them, choking them. The tunnel widened into a chamber, littered with relics broken and discarded. Adrian spread his arms with a smile, his voice dripping triumph. The Templars hid their truths in fragments. Jonathan scanned the shattered artifacts, muttering, "Fragments don't make truth." Margaret Ellis stepped forward, lifting a cracked chalice, her hands trembling. "These belong to the dead," she whispered, her voice almost reverent. Adrian leaned closer, eyes gleaming, and the dead speak louder than the living. Jonathan's suspicion hardened into anger. "He's using us," he said through clenched teeth. Margaret's gaze shifted between the two men, the chalice heavy in her hands, torn between the threat Adrian posed and the loyalty she felt for Jonathan. The chamber seemed to exhale, shadows bending, as if betrayal itself waited in the stone. The chamber was thick with silence after Adrian's boast. Jonathan Ward's voice sliced through, low and angry. "Fragments don't prove truth, they only breed lies." Margaret Ellis clutched the cracked chalice tighter, her knuckles white. Adrian cross-chuckled, but his eyes betrayed unease. "You doubt me, but still you follow." Jonathan stepped closer, shadows stretching long across the chamber. "We follow because you dangle answers," he hissed. Margaret interjected, her tone sharp. "Both of you. This is tearing us apart." The flicker of torchlight revealed relics scattered like bones, whispers of betrayal hanging thick in the air. Margaret moved toward Jonathan, her voice low but urgent. "This obsession is devouring you." Jonathan's gaze softened for a moment, but his words were hard. "The truth is all that matters." Adrian leaned against the wall, smirking. "Truth is only power dressed in another name." Jonathan snapped, "And you've sold your soul for it." Margaret's eyes glistened with conflict, torn between loyalty and fear. "If you continue down this path," she whispered, "there will be nothing left of you." Jonathan's hand gripped the satchel strap, as though holding himself together. Silence pressed like stone around them, waiting to crush. The sound of footsteps echoed from a tunnel beyond, faint but deliberate. Margaret's head snapped toward it, whispering, "Someone's here." Adrian's face darkened, his voice low. "Green's hounds, no doubt." Jonathan's eyes burned, muttering, "He won't stop until the truth is buried." Adrian stepped closer, smirk gone, replaced by urgency. "Then we move now, or die down here." Margaret glared. "Why help us, Adrian? What do you gain?" He hesitated, just long enough for Jonathan to notice. Suspicion sharpened in his voice. "Because you need us alive. For now." The tension split the chamber like a blade, the silence fractured by fear. They pressed into the narrow corridor, torches throwing restless shadows. Margaret whispered to Jonathan, "He's guiding us into his trap." Jonathan answered coldly, "I know, but his knowledge is our key." Adrian turned, his face half-lit, tone sharp, "Without me you'll never leave these tunnels." Jonathan's grip on the satchel tightened, whispering, "Better to die with truth than live with lies." Margaret's eyes burned as she snapped, "You'll drag us all into your grave." The corridor echoed with every word, as if the stones themselves judged their choices. The smell of damp earth and iron filled their lungs. The corridor opened into a vaulted hall, carvings stretching across the ceiling like veins of history. Jonathan stopped, eyes fixed on a sigil glowing faintly on the wall. "This is it," he breathed. Margaret whispered, "Or it's another illusion." Adrian stepped forward, voice full of triumph. "The final key to the treasure." Jonathan pulled him back sharply, fury in his voice. "Not another step." Margaret's chest rose with rapid breaths caught between them. Adrian's mask of charm slipped, a flicker of desperation revealed. "Without me," he hissed, "you have nothing." Jonathan stared him down, rage simmering, trust finally shattered. The vaulted hall's faint glow faded as Jonathan Ward pressed a hand to the sigil, the stone shuddering beneath his touch. Margaret Ellis gasped, "It's alive!" The wall groaned open, revealing a spiraling descent into blackness. Adrian Cross grinned, his voice laced with triumph. The final threshold. Jonathan's eyes hardened, whispering, or the final trap. Margaret clutched her coat tighter, muttering, every step forward feels like betrayal. The tunnel exhaled stale air, cold and damp, brushing their faces like a warning. Torchlight trembled in Jonathan's grip as he declared, "We go down, or everything ends here." Silence weighed heavy as they stepped into the abyss. The spiral staircase groaned beneath their steps, ancient stone damp with centuries of moisture. Margaret's whisper echoed, "It feels like we're walking into a grave." Jonathan Ward's reply was calm but grim. "Graves hold truths, too." Adrian Cross laughed softly, his voice bouncing against the walls, spoken like a man who doesn't fear the dead. Jonathan's lantern light revealed faint carvings on the stairwell, shapes like swords and crosses carved by hands long gone. Margaret reached out, tracing one, whispering, "They marked their descent." Adrian leaned in, eyes gleaming. "Every mark is a warning." Jonathan kept moving, his silence filled with fury. The staircase ended in a vast crypt, lined with sarcophagi. Margaret's breath hitched. "We shouldn't be here." Jonathan Ward's voice was low, steady. "This is where they hid what mattered most." Adrian Cross strode ahead, brushing dust from a lid, whispering, "The order buried more than bones." Jonathan caught his wrist, growling, "Show respect." Adrian yanked free, sneering, "Respect doesn't unlock secrets." Margaret's eyes darted across the chamber, landing on a sarcophagus carved with strange symbols. She whispered, "This one is different." Jonathan stepped closer, eyes narrowing at the markings. Silence descended, heavy as stone, broken only by their own tense breaths. Jonathan knelt beside the marked sarcophagus, lantern glow spilling across the ancient carvings. Margaret whispered, "It looks like a seal." Adrian stepped closer, eyes gleaming with greed. "Then break it." Jonathan snapped, "Breaking isn't the same as unlocking." Margaret placed her hand gently on the stone, her voice soft. "It feels like it's waiting." The air grew heavier, pressing against their lungs. Adrian's voice sharpened. "The treasure lies within, and hesitation is death." Jonathan turned, his tone hard. "The only death comes from rushing blind." Silence stretched, the crypt itself holding its breath as the three figures stood in fragile balance. The crypt quaked as Jonathan pressed the symbol, stone grinding open with a deafening roar. Dust and cold air poured out, swirling like ghosts. Margaret stumbled back, whispering, "What have you done?" Jonathan's voice was calm, resolute. "What had to be done?" Adrian surged forward, eyes wild. "It's here, the heart of their legacy." He reached for the opening, but Jonathan blocked him, voice firm, "Not until we know the cost." Margaret's heart pounded, fear clawing at her throat as the chamber rumbled. The stone lid shifted fully aside, revealing a staircase plunging deeper still. Darkness yawned like a beast awaiting its prey. The hidden staircase plunged into silence, each step echoing like a heartbeat beneath the earth. Jonathan Ward led, lantern trembling in his grip. Margaret Ellis whispered, "It feels endless." Adrian Cross followed, his voice sharp, endless, but worth everything. Jonathan's jaw tightened, muttering, "You mistake worth for greed." The tunnel opened into a chamber carved with symbols that pulsed faintly with unseen light. Margaret's breath caught. "It's alive." Adrian grinned, eyes wide with hunger. "The treasure of the Templars is real." Jonathan's gaze hardened, whispering, "Or their warning is." The silence pressed against their skin, heavy with centuries of secrets. The chamber widened, revealing a stone altar draped in dust. Upon it lay a sealed chest bound in iron, engraved with a cross. Adrian Cross rushed forward, voice breaking with excitement. "This is it!" Jonathan Ward blocked him, lantern casting long shadows across the floor. "Not another step," he growled. Margaret Ellis whispered, "What if opening it unleashes something we can't control?" Adrian's grin twisted into desperation. "Then control it we must." Jonathan's eyes narrowed, his voice sharp. That's why men like you should never hold truth. The chest seemed to hum faintly, vibrating like a heartbeat beneath their feet. Jonathan knelt at the chest, tracing the iron bindings with steady fingers. Margaret Ellis whispered, "It feels like it's waiting for something." Adrian Cross leaned closer, voice frantic, "It waits for us, for me." Jonathan looked up sharply, growling, "You mean, it waits for anyone foolish enough?" Margaret's hand trembled as she touched Jonathan's arm. "If you open it, there's no going back." Jonathan's eyes softened briefly, but his words were cold. "The truth never lets you go." Adrian's impatience cracked into rage. "Then open it, or I will." The chest thrummed louder, as though alive, demanding a decision. With a deep breath, Jonathan pressed his hand to the chest's symbol. The bindings split with a grinding shriek, light spilling out in a blinding rush. Margaret shielded her face, whispering, "It's not treasure, it's knowledge." Adrian Cross staggered back, his voice breaking, "No, it's mine." He lunged forward, but Jonathan shoved him aside, fury burning in his eyes. "Truth cannot be owned," Jonathan growled. Margaret's eyes brimmed with tears as the light revealed ancient manuscripts inside, pages fluttering with power. Adrian screamed in desperation, his hunger collapsing into madness. The chamber trembled as the past awakened into the present. The manuscripts glowed, revealing truths of the Templars' legacy, secrets of faith, betrayal, and power. Jonathan whispered, "This is no treasure. It's a warning." Margaret Ellis's voice cracked. "What will you do with it?" Jonathan's eyes dimmed, resolve etched in stone. "Protect it. From men like Green, from men like Adrian." Adrian Cross, trembling, tried one final time, shouting, "It belongs to the world." Jonathan's hand pushed him away, firm and final. The light dimmed, sealing its truth within Jonathan's resolve. Margaret's gaze softened, whispering, "Then you found what you were seeking." Silence followed, deep and eternal, as the chamber swallowed the last echoes of the Templars.